Welcome back for another video. Today we're going to talk about, or for this video we're going to talk about adjustment layers. And I just grabbed this sort of stock image of some lilacs off the internet, and I wanted to use it as just a basic example to talk about adjustment layers. So what adjustment layers do is that they basically they make it so that you can change brightness and contrast after the fact. So I'm going to demonstrate that by going to Image, Adjustments, and let's say Brightness and Contrast. We have all of these here, but if we did Brightness and Contrast and bump the contrast some, drop the brightness, I mean there's no right answer here. It doesn't even really need any adjustment. I'm just showing. A little pro tip, if you said use legacy, that would actually make these have a lot more effect. So 60 would be a lot more powerful, a lot more pushed toward the high contrast. Whereas if you don't have that checked, then it's more a subtle difference. So I'll just say OK. So you'll notice over here on my layers there's no difference, there's just background still. So my contrast changed, yeah, but supposing I wanted to change it back, the only thing I could do is go to Edit, Undo. So there's a much better way to do this, and so that is actually staying on your layers right here. Okay, I'm at layer 1, or actually it's called background, and if I wanted to go up here to adjustments, yours might be on masks, I don't know, but if you click adjustments, you'll see all these adjustment layers, they're called. And so if I clicked brightness and contrast, then what I actually get is another layer of stuff here. And so that gives me this brightness and contrast. You'll notice I even have the use legacy right there. And so what I can do now is I can keep working in my document, but I can also go back. So I can click background, then I could click here, I could change it. I could go down here to new layer, I could go back here, I could change it. So you see the point is that it's pretty easy to tweak this and modify it and be able to push and pull these sliders. And so this is my adjustment layer. And so I could also drop it off, and so it's not having an effect with this eye tool. And then I could also go up here to opacity, and I could change its opacity, and that's kind of the same thing as with any layer. It just changes the fact, it changes how much it actually has an effect. So notice you can't change the opacity of a background layer, but I'll double click this and rename it to layer 0 and say OK. So now I can change the opacity. You'll see checkerboarding showing up because we'll be dropping out this image and there's nothing behind it. So that would show that it's transparent. So that's the same effect as this, that you have this opacity here that you can drop in and drop out. So another thing that I'll introduce now and then focus on in a video on its own, but I'll drop it in now for the sake of introducing it, is this thing called a layer mask. And so now this is having an effect on the entire image, right? So that's fine, but what we want to do is maybe only have an effect on part of the image. And so right now I'm actually going to use my left bracket key, which is right above the apostrophe, and I'm going to drop the size of that down. I could also go up here to size and change the size of my brush. And I could also right click and change the size. But if I didn't want to do that, I could just use my bracket key. So anyway, the moral of the story here is that white shows everything. So everything's white, so everything's getting affected. However, if I painted black anywhere in here, you wouldn't see any black, but you would see that this no longer had an effect. And so I'm going to click here, or I could hit X, and I'm going to click and start to paint in here. My opacity, notice, is only 7%, so I might bring that up to 40. And so what I'm doing is I'm painting black on, and it looks like I'm changing it slightly, but I'm actually not. I'm just making it so that this layer doesn't have an effect. So now click, and you'll notice wherever is black is not affecting this, and wherever is white is affecting it. I could go back, making sure that this is selected here, and I could paint white. And I could go over here, click like that. So you can see in miniature, this is starting to show up. And we'll cover this more. Those are called layer masks, and they can affect a lot more than just adjustment layers. But I did want to show them since we had the opportunity, and this was a pretty simple lesson.